All right, so bottom-up design, as I mentioned, that is the basis for making your own function library, and you can also create a namespace. Um, so these are both useful things that you can actually do on your own. You don't have to necessarily rely only on standard ones. You could build one of your own, and then if it's really awesome, you could upload it to c++.com, and other people might think it's pretty awesome and start using it, and then you can enter the annals of um, of the master builders of C++, like Bjarne Stroustrup, because I know he's a household name that you all think is just a god among men, or at least a god among Danish people. But anyway, so where were we? So you can also create what's called a header for libraries. And the upside of having a library is that you can have names that are not going to conflict. So you can name things what you like. And if it's stored in a library, it doesn't worry about anything external to it. So if you use the variable X and then the programmer uses the variable X, you're not going to start butting heads and causing problems, because the library will be a self-contained object that doesn't care about anything external to it. So we've been using the standard namespace a lot. When we do that, we don't have to write like std : and then like a command. You might, if you didn't include the standard namespace, every time you call cin and cout, you would have to do like std cin or std cout. But including the namespace saves the time and hassle of having to do quite that much typing. A namespace lets us distinguish one library's functions from another. And then with a namespace, one library can have a get data function. And then you could have like a different library that also has a get data function. And so even though the functions have the same name, the use of the namespace can help tell them apart. And so we can create our own namespace this way. We just do namespace and then the name of the namespace within the braces, and then we like fill in stuff. So we could say inside the braces, we include all function declarations that are part of the namespace. So let's check out an example of a namespace, shall we? So what do we got? So we're going to include the IO stream, and we're going to include the standard namespace, and then we're going to make a new namespace, English. We're going to have a function greeting. It's not going to return anything, so its type is void. And all this function does, it's going to cout, it's going to spit out the word hello, and then drop us down a line. And so you notice that I don't have a thing for using namespace English. So if I'm going to call that function, I need to tell the compiler what namespace it's calling from. I have to use a pair of colons, and then I put the actual call of the function right there. So I do this, and it'll call the greeting function from the English namespace, and it'll say hello. Right on. Okay, so then what we can also do is do something like this, where we can have like multiple namespaces. Come on. All right. So here we're going to have multiple namespaces. Here we have a namespace English, which we already saw. Here we've got a namespace Spanish. And again, it's going to have a greeting function as well. And all that does is it outputs the word hola. For those of you who don't speak Spanish, hola is the Spanish word for hello. All right. So int main, here we're going to call greeting from the English namespace. Here we're going to call greeting from the Spanish namespace. And it's going to output hello and then hola. And there you go. So when you've got the same name, you can have the same name repeated in different places. The catch is you need to tell the compiler which namespace you are talking about. So we have two namespaces, English and Spanish. They each have a greeting function. We have to specify the namespace when we call the function. Since there are multiple greetings, the namespace is needed to tell the compiler which function to call. If we leave off the namespace declaration, we're going to get an error message because there are multiple greeting functions. So we could add a line using namespace English to the code, and then that way, if we call the greeting function, it will call it from the English namespace by default. And that tells the compiler that when the function call is unresolved, use the function from that namespace. The line using the namespace must appear after the namespace is defined. That is very important. So let's check this out, shall we? So like here's our namespace English, here's our namespace Spanish. Here we're setting Spanish as the namespace to use. And so here I've got greeting. When I call greeting, if I don't tell the compiler which namespace to pull from, it will pull from Spanish, because here I'm telling it, hey bro, use that namespace if I don't like come out and tell you to like use a different namespace. And you run this, and there you go. It's gonna say hola. And again, the namespace has to exist before you try using it. You can't just put this up here in the header next to using namespace standard, because if you do that, it's going to get very grumpy at you, because it's like, bruh, how am I supposed to use this? Because it starts from the top, and it's like, bruh, how am I supposed to use the namespace Spanish when there ain't no namespace Spanish? And you're kind of like, bruh, it's just like down here, bruh. And then the compiler's like, well, bruh, you got to like put this crap down here, bruh. It's like, for realsies. Like, you're killing me, Smalls. Like, don't use a namespace until after you make it, bruh. And I'm like, sorry, bruh. He's like, it's okay, bruh. I still love you, bruh. It's like, man, you're my bruh. All right, anyway. So there you go. So many times having the using line is discouraged just because it is hard to tell just by looking at a function call which function is called. So there's kind of a trade-off between convenience versus readability. So, you know, here it's maybe not so bad because they're not that super far apart, but like if you are going to pull something from a namespace, it is kind of preferred if you're doing it from your own namespace to write it with the double colon notation, just because that way it's absolutely clear to everybody. You know, they don't have to be going cross-referencing different parts of the code. They can just be like, okay, they're calling a function and it's coming from this namespace. Somewhere in the code is that namespace. I'm not going to look for it now. I'm just trying to read it and understand what the program does right here. So anyway, that is namespaces.